Not just surviving, not just pushing back, but turning their we*P*NS against them. They used laughter to silence me. Now, I was using their laughter to expose them. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The night of the final showdown wasn't planned. It erupted like a storm no one could hold back. By then, the cracks in my parents' carefully polished facade had grown too wide to patch. Relatives whispered. Neighbors avoided eye contact. And I, armed with recordings, journal entries, and Lila's unwavering support, was no longer the quiet child they could mock into silence. It happened at my cousin Natalie's engagement party. The house was buzzing with chatter, glasses clinking, music humming softly in the background. I had decided to keep my distance, to simply exist without provoking anything. But my parents couldn't help themselves. They never could. "Look at her," Mom said loudly enough for half the room to hear as I walked past with a plate of food. Still sulking. Honestly, I don't know why we even bother bringing her around. She's nothing but dead weight. Dad chuckled, adding, "Don't mind her. That's our family tradition, raise one child who's worth something and one extra." Laughter, nervous and forced, rippled through the group. My hands trembled, but this time not with humiliation, with fury. I set the plate down and pulled my phone from my purse. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the room. The chatter died instantly. All eyes turned toward me. Dad smirked. "Oh, are we going to get another dramatic performance? Go on, sweetheart, everyone loves a show." Instead of answering, I connected my phone to the speaker system. Natalie's fiancé was a DJ, and the Bluetooth connection was open. With a single tap, the room filled with my parents' voices. Of course she believes it. That's the point. If she doubts herself, she won't fight us. She'll always need us to tell her who she is. Gasps rippled across the crowd. My mother's smile froze. My father's face drained of color. The audio kept rolling, clip after clip of their cruelest jokes, their laughter sharp as knives, their admissions of manipulation whispered in the dark but now blazing in the open. The room erupted. My aunt covered her mouth, horrified. Natalie shook her head, whispering, "Oh my God." My uncle, usually silent, snapped, "What the hell is wrong with you two?" Dad lunged for the phone, but Lila, bless her courage, stepped in front of me, blocking him. "Touch her and you'll regret it," she hissed. I turned to face my parents, my hands no longer shaking. "You spent years telling me I was the problem. Too sensitive. Too dramatic. But here's the truth. It was never me. It was you." Mom tried to laugh, the sound brittle. "Come on, everyone knows kids exaggerate. She's twisting things." But the evidence spoke louder. No one was laughing now. The final blow came from Natalie, the bride-to-be. She stood up, her voice firm. "You've humiliated her for years and we all watched. Not anymore. You don't get to excuse abuse as jokes. Not here. Not ever again." The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter they had ever thrown at me. My parents stood there, exposed, cornered, powerless. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking. For once, they were. That night, something broke, not in me, but in the grip they had held for so long. And as I watched them sputter, scrambling for excuses that no one believed, I realized the truth. Their reign of cruel humor was over. The final showdown wasn't a screaming match. It was silence, everyone finally seeing them for who they really were. And me, standing tall in the wreckage, free. After that night, everything shifted. The silence that followed the exposure was louder than all the years of their cruel laughter combined. My parents weren't banished with pitchforks, but something inside the family snapped. Their words no longer carried weight, no longer twisted reality into something I had to swallow. In the weeks that followed, relatives reached out privately. My aunt sent me a message. "I should have spoken up years ago. I'm sorry. You deserved better." My uncle stopped by with a box of old books, telling me quietly, "You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." Even Natalie called, her voice thick with regret. "We all saw it, but we let it slide. Never again." My parents, on the other hand, went into damage control mode. They tried to spin the story, telling anyone who would listen that I'd edited the recordings, that I was vindictive and ungrateful. But the more they fought, the more they revealed their desperation. And no one was buying it anymore. At home, the tension was suffocating. They stopped making jokes about me, at least out loud, but the glares, the muttered insults under their breath, the cold war of slammed doors lingered. Yet for the first time, I wasn't crushed by it. Their silence wasn't power anymore. It was proof they knew I'd won. I poured my energy into building a new life outside their shadow. I joined the school newspaper, using my voice to write articles that cut through hypocrisy. I picked up art again, sketching late into the night, filling page after page with images that felt like freedom. And with Lila's encouragement, I even started therapy, where I learned the most important truth of all. Their cruelty was never my fault. For years, I thought I was broken, too sensitive, too dramatic, too weak. But standing there with the truth finally out, I realized I wasn't broken at all. I'd been bent, yes, but not destroyed. And bending only made me stronger when I stood up again. The aftershocks rippled long after. Holidays became quieter. Fewer relatives showed up when my parents hosted. Some family members cut them off entirely. My parents wore their bitterness like armor, but it didn't pierce me anymore. Their power came from my silence, and I'd taken that away. I sometimes think back to all those nights, lying awake, wondering if I was crazy for feeling hurt. Now I know better. I wasn't crazy, I was surviving. And survival, in its own way, was a form of rebellion. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch journaling, Dad walked past without a word. No insult. No smirk. Just silence. For once, I was the one laughing. Not at him, not cruelly, but with relief. Because I knew, finally, they couldn't touch me. Not really. The scars are there, of course. Words don't vanish just because the truth is exposed. But scars are proof of healing, not weakness. And if there's one thing I carry with me now, it's this: they tried to define me with cruelty. I defined myself with truth. And truth will always win. When the pharmacist stopped mid-count, glanced at the screen and whispered, "You're listed as deceased here," I felt my stomach drop. Dead. I was standing right there, breathing, clutching my prescription slip. But in that moment, a simple refill turned into the first crack in the foundation of my entire life. Up until that afternoon, I believed my world was predictable. My name is Daniel Cross, 33 years old, and I lived in a quiet corner of Phoenix. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized tech firm, lived in a modest but comfortable apartment, and spent weekends hiking the desert trails or grabbing coffee with my girlfriend, Sophie. Life wasn't extraordinary, but it was stable. I had routines that gave me comfort. Mornings meant strong coffee, quick emails, and the steady hum of my car radio during the drive downtown. Lunch was usually at the same sandwich shop across the street from the office. In the evenings, I'd stop by the gym or drop in at Sophie's place to cook dinner together. She teased me for my predictability, but I liked the order of it. It kept the world calm, manageable. Even my visits to the local pharmacy were part of that rhythm. Every month, I picked up the same medication for seasonal allergies. I knew the staff by name: Claire at the counter, Josh in the back. They always smiled, made small talk about the weather or the traffic. It was routine, reliable, harmless. That's why I didn't think twice when I walked in on a sunny Thursday afternoon, handed Claire my slip, and waited. She tapped at her computer, nodded, and began counting out pills into a bottle. I leaned against the counter, scrolling my phone, only half paying attention. Then she froze. The pills stopped mid-count. Her fingers hovered above the tray. I glanced up, confused. She was staring at the screen, her brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" I asked lightly, trying to mask the sudden knot forming in my chest. Claire's eyes flicked to me, then back to the monitor. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I don't know how to say this, but it says here you're deceased." I laughed, thinking it was a bad joke. "Deceased? Do I look deceased to you?" But she didn't laugh. Her expression was pale, nervous. "Daniel, I'm serious. The system has you flagged. Date of death listed last month." A chill ran through me. I leaned over the counter, staring at the screen. There it was in black and white. Cross, Daniel. Status: deceased. "That's impossible," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm standing right here." She shook her head quickly. "I know. It has to be an error. I'll call my supervisor, maybe corporate IT," but her voice had already drawn attention. Another customer glanced over, curiosity written on their face. My skin prickled with embarrassment, as if I'd been exposed as some kind of fraud. I grabbed the counter. "Fix it, please." Claire nodded frantically, assuring me she would sort it out. She even handed me the bottle, whispering, "Don't worry, I'll override it for now." But I walked out of that pharmacy with my mind spinning. Dead. How could a system list me as dead? I pulled out my phone, checking my bank app, my email, even my work login. Everything seemed normal. No alerts, no blocks. Just life as usual. By the time I reached home, I convinced myself it was a glitch. Databases got things wrong all the time. Someone had probably typed the wrong name, the wrong ID. I ordered takeout, watched Sophie scroll through Netflix until we landed on some crime documentary, and tried to laugh at the irony. But lying in bed that night, the words replayed in my mind like a broken record: "You're listed as deceased here." It was absurd, yes, but it was also the first warning that my stable life wasn't as solid as I believed. Because if one system thought I was dead, how long until the rest of the world agreed? And what if, just what if, it wasn't a mistake at all? The next morning, I stood in line at the pharmacy counter, clutching the prescription bottle for my anxiety meds. It was routine: refill, pay, leave. Except this time, the pharmacist, a young man with nervous eyes, froze mid-count. He glanced at his monitor, then back at me, pale. Mrs. Ellison? He asked carefully. Yes, I said, already sensing something was off. He swallowed hard. According to this system, you're listed as deceased. The world tilted for a second. I blinked, laughed awkwardly, waiting for the punchline. Excuse me. He turned the screen toward me. My name, birth date, and address were there, beneath a bold red banner. Status, deceased. I felt my pulse quicken. The other customers in line pretended not to stare. That can't be right, I said, forcing a smile. I'm clearly standing here. I'm sure it's some database glitch, he stammered. But I can't legally process your refill until this is corrected. When I left, my hands trembled so violently that I dropped my car keys twice before unlocking the door. The autumn air suddenly felt too sharp, too unreal. I sat behind the wheel, trying to rationalize it, a clerical error, a data mix-up. But deep down, something colder twisted in my chest. That evening, I told my husband, Jason. He frowned, his fork clinking against his plate. It's probably insurance data, he said. You changed providers last month. Maybe something got lost in transition. Then why did the guy look terrified? I asked quietly. Jason shrugged, reaching for his phone. You worry too much. I'll call HR tomorrow. But he didn't. Over the next few days, strange things began piling up. The electric bill came addressed to Estate of Naomi Ellison. My health insurance app locked me out with a notice that said, account holder inactive due to death certificate filed. Each discovery made my stomach twist harder. When I tried calling the insurance helpline, the automated voice confirmed it again. Our records indicate the policyholder, Naomi Ellison, is deceased as of September 12th. September 12th. My birthday. I hung up, heart pounding. It wasn't just a random date. Someone had picked it. At night, I lay awake listening to Jason's steady breathing beside me. I told myself it was all just digital chaos, a bureaucratic mistake, but something about his calmness unsettled me. He hadn't once looked alarmed. Not once offered to check in person. A week later, I visited the county registrar's office. The clerk typed my information, then frowned. This is strange, she murmured. Your death certificate was filed electronically. Signed by Dr. Harris, your primary care physician. Dr. Harris had been our family doctor for years. I called his office as soon as I left. The receptionist put me on hold for what felt like forever before coming back, voice tight. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ellison. Dr. Harris is unavailable, and, our records match the state database. It shows you passed away. My hand clenched around the phone. Passed away? I'm talking to you right now. I understand, she whispered. But this line isn't secure. Maybe come in person. When I arrived the next morning, the clinic's front desk worker looked like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe literally. Naomi, she gasped. But your husband came by last week. He signed the paperwork himself. My heart froze. Paperwork for what? She hesitated, then whispered, for your death certificate. The room spun. I gripped the counter, my nails biting into the wood. That's impossible, I said, my voice cracking. There must be a mistake. But deep down, I already knew. Jason hadn't been forgetful or busy. He'd been methodical. Every missing piece, every glitch, was falling into place. That night, when he got home, I tried to sound casual. The clinic called me today, I said, keeping my tone light. Weird, right? Apparently, someone filed my death certificate. Jason didn't flinch. He just took a slow sip of his drink, then smiled, that calm, unreadable smile I used to love. That's absurd, he said softly. Why would anyone do that? But his eyes didn't match his tone. When I went to bed, I locked the bedroom door for the first time in our marriage. The morning after locking my door, I woke up to silence. Jason had already left for work, or at least that's what his note on the fridge said. Gone early. Be back late. Love you. The words looked mechanical, neat. Too neat. I spent the morning calling every agency I could think of, the Social Security Administration, the DMV, even my bank. Each conversation spiraled into the same surreal nightmare. My identity was gone. Cancelled. Ma'am, one woman said flatly over the phone, our records show your social security number is associated with a deceased individual. I'm afraid we can't verify you. I'm alive. I snapped. I can come in right now. I'll bring my ID, That won't help, she interrupted. The system won't even let me enter your number anymore. I'm sorry. By noon, I discovered my credit cards were frozen, my email locked, and my work payroll account suspended pending verification of reported death. Every part of my life that depended on documentation, on proof, had vanished. And Jason. He texted once, everything okay? Don't stress about the insurance thing. I'll fix it. The message made my skin crawl. When I tried to call him, it went straight to voicemail. By evening, desperation pushed me to drive to his office. The receptionist looked confused when I asked for him. Jason Ellison? He doesn't work here anymore. My pulse pounded in my ears. He quit. She shook her head. Transferred. About 2 weeks ago. He didn't leave forwarding info. That was the same week the death certificate had been filed. I stumbled back to my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. None of it made sense. Why would he do this? Why go through the effort of erasing me? That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with unknown numbers, silent calls that ended as soon as I answered. I turned off the ringer and curled up on the couch, listening to every creak in the apartment. At 2 a.m., I heard the lock turn. My breath caught. I hadn't given anyone a key except Naomi. Jason's voice drifted in from the doorway, calm, casual, as if nothing was wrong. Why are you sleeping on the couch? My heart hammered in my chest. I couldn't sleep. He smiled faintly, stepping closer. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe you should see someone about that. I'm fine, I said quickly, edging away. He tilted his head. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're not yourself. Calling hospitals, making wild accusations. It's almost like you're paranoid. There was something chilling in his tone, not anger, but amusement. Like he was testing how far he could push before I snapped. The next morning, my phone was gone. I tore the apartment apart, but it had vanished. When I asked Jason, he shrugged. Maybe you misplaced it. You've been forgetful lately. That phrase, forgetful lately, made me freeze. It was the same phrase he'd used with my doctor years ago, when he convinced Dr. Harris that my panic attacks were episodes. I was being rewritten. Again. Over the next few days, he became attentive in ways that felt wrong. Flowers on the table, breakfast made, a new lock on the front door that only he had the key for. He watched me constantly, not protectively, but like a scientist observing an experiment. The world outside shrank too. My coworkers stopped replying to emails. My best friend, Tessa, didn't answer her phone. When I drove to her apartment, her roommate said she'd moved out a week ago, no forwarding address. Each step toward help collapsed under me. My life had become a series of locked doors and missing faces. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, or rather, the estate of Naomi Ellison. Inside was a photocopy of my death certificate. My blood ran cold as I scanned it. There, beneath the bold black letters, was Jason's signature. Next of kin. My hands shook as I reread the document, bile rising in my throat. My husband hadn't just erased me digitally. He'd made it legal. That night, I confronted him. I waited until he came home, until he set his keys on the counter and turned toward me with that practiced, easy smile. Rough day? He asked. I held up the paper. What is this? His eyes flicked down, then up again. His expression didn't change, not even a twitch. Where did you get that? Don't pretend you don't know. My voice trembled. You filed it. You had me declared dead. He sighed, like I was being difficult. Naomi, that's ridiculous. You've been working too hard. You're confusing things. Stop it. I shouted. Stop lying. For the first time, his calm cracked. He stepped closer, voice dropping. If you keep this up, people are going to think you really are unstable. You want that. You want to end up in a hospital again. I froze. He smiled softly, touching my arm, gentle, almost affectionate. You need rest, Naomi. Everything will make sense soon. That night, I lay awake in the dark, realizing that I wasn't fighting a glitch anymore. I was fighting someone who wanted me gone, not metaphorically, but completely. And he'd already convinced the world I was dead. By the time a full week passed, I no longer recognized my life. My phone was gone, my accounts frozen, my job unreachable. Jason moved through the apartment like a ghost, always one step ahead, always watching. I knew that if I didn't find out why he was doing this, the world would finish erasing me completely. I started small. The only thing he hadn't taken was an old laptop I'd kept at my mother's house. Early one morning, while Jason was running errands, I drove there, heart hammering. Mom greeted me with confusion. Sweetheart, she said, pale. I got flowers from Jason last week. He said you'd passed in your sleep. I didn't believe it, but when your number stopped working, I sat down hard. He told you I was dead? Tears welled in her eyes. There was even a newspaper notice, just a few lines, with your name. I tried to find him, but he said the funeral would be private. The world tilted again. There was a public obituary. That meant he hadn't just faked paperwork, he'd published my death. I opened the laptop and typed my name into the local paper's search bar. There it was, Naomi Ellison, 1989 to 2024. The short obituary read, beloved wife and daughter, passed suddenly after a prolonged illness. Illness. The word made my stomach churn. He was writing my story for me. Mom's trembling hand pointed at the screen. Honey, what's happening? I don't know, I whispered, but I'm going to find out. The first clue came from the hospital. I went back to Dr. Harris's clinic and demanded to see my records. The receptionist recognized me instantly. This time she didn't try to stop me. They transferred everything to a facility called South Mesa Wellness, she said. South Mesa Wellness wasn't a hospital. It was a private psychiatric center on the outskirts of town. Driving there felt like walking into someone else's nightmare. The building was beige and windowless, surrounded by fences disguised as hedges. When I asked for patient information, the receptionist's smile flickered. Are you family? She asked. I'm the patient, I said. Naomi Ellison. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. One moment. She disappeared through a side door, and within seconds 2 security guards appeared in the lobby. I backed toward the exit. I just want my records. But the taller guard shook his head. Mrs. Ellison's file is sealed. She's deceased. I ran. Back in my car, shaking, I called Lila Tran, a coworker from before everything went wrong. To my shock, she answered. Naomi, where have you been? Jason said you moved overseas. He said what? Yeah, to get treatment abroad. He sent a mass email after your funeral was cancelled. Said he'd handle your estate. My estate. The words stung. Lila, listen to me, I said. I'm alive. He's trying to erase me. I need help. She went quiet. Naomi, this sounds huge. But if what you're saying is true, he's committing fraud on a massive scale. I exhaled shakily. Can you check company records? See if he's moved anything under my name. Within hours, she called back. Naomi, you need to sit down. He accessed your pension and insurance accounts the week before your death. Everything's been liquidated. It hit me all at once. He hadn't just wanted me gone. He wanted the money, the clean slate, the sympathy. Jason was cashing in on my death. But there was more. Lila forwarded a file she'd pulled from the HR archives. Inside was a scanned copy of a form labeled Life Insurance Beneficiary Change. Next of kin, Jason Ellison. Date, 2 weeks before my birthday. He'd planned it perfectly. Declare me dead, collect the payout, vanish. My breath came in shallow bursts. He's still living with me, I whispered. Why hasn't he run? Lila hesitated. Maybe he needs something else first. That night, I found out what something else was. Jason came home early, carrying a small metal case. When I asked what it was, he smiled, the same serene mask. Just paperwork, he said. For the bank. Later, while he showered, curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me open it. Inside was a stack of documents, neatly bound. The first page was a power of attorney form with my forged signature. Below it, authorization to sell my remaining assets. Car, apartment, storage unit. At the bottom, a date. Tomorrow. I felt a surge of cold clarity. Tomorrow, I'd truly disappear. Legally, financially, permanently. The shower stopped. I barely had time to slide the case shut before he stepped out, towel around his waist, smiling as if nothing had happened. Can't sleep again? He asked. Yeah, I murmured. Just thinking. He kissed my forehead. Don't think too much. You'll drive yourself crazy. I smiled back because it was the only wee *p*n I had left. That night, as he drifted off beside me, I stared at the ceiling and whispered a silent promise. If he wants me dead on paper, then I'll make sure the next time he sees my name, it'll be in a police report. In the darkness, the pieces aligned. Forged signatures, sealed files, insurance payouts, psychiatric transfers. Jason hadn't just made an error. He'd orchestrated an entire death. And tomorrow, he'd try to bury what was left of me for good. But he had no idea that the woman he thought was already gone was still here, wide awake, and ready to fight back. When I woke the next morning, Jason was gone. His note on the counter was shorter than usual. Bank appointment. Back late. I stared at it until the letters blurred. He thought today would be the day he erased the last pieces of me. He had no idea I was already moving. I grabbed the metal case he'd hidden under the bed and slipped it into my bag. If I went to the police now with only a story, they'd call it a domestic dispute or a clerical error. If I went with forged documents, beneficiary changes, death certificates with his signature, they'd have no choice but to act. First, I needed somewhere safe. I called Mom from a payphone. My old phone was still gone, and spoke in a whisper. Don't tell anyone you've talked to me. Don't tell Jason. I'm coming over. When I arrived, she hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I thought you were gone for good." "I almost am," I said. "But not yet." I spread the documents out on her kitchen table, the forged power of attorney, the insurance change forms, the death certificate. She stared at them, hands trembling. "He planned everything," she murmured. "You can't go back there." "I'm not," I said. "I'm going to the police." But part of me knew police alone wouldn't be enough. Jason had already wormed his story into every system. If he could convince the state, the bank, even my doctor, he could convince a desk sergeant that his unstable wife was making up wild accusations. I needed airtight evidence. That's when I called Lila again. "Do you still have access to the security archives at work?" I asked. "Yeah, but not for long." "Why?" "I need footage of Jason moving my files, logging in under my credentials, anything." "He's stolen everything." Lila didn't even hesitate. "Text me an address. I'll bring what I can tonight." While waiting, I started building a paper trail of my own. I scanned every document onto Mom's old printer, emailing copies to a new encrypted account I'd created under a fake name. I recorded a video on her phone explaining everything, who I was, what Jason had done, where the evidence was stored. "If something happens to me," I said into the lens, "please give this to Detective Sanders at the Phoenix PD." When Lila arrived after dark, she brought a flash drive. "It's not much," she whispered, "but it shows him using your logins to move money into his accounts." It was enough. I felt a flicker of power return to my veins. The last piece fell into place by accident. While scrolling through Jason's public social media on my laptop, I saw a post tagged at South Mesa Wellness. A check-in, dated 2 weeks ago, with a caption, "Everything in motion." He hadn't even hidden it. He was bragging. I took *TS, printed them out, and added them to the folder. Now I had death certificate with his signature, power of attorney forged, insurance beneficiary change forms, HR logs showing him accessing my accounts, social media posts linking him to the psychiatric center. Enough to crack the story wide open. But I didn't want to just survive. I wanted him to see me alive when the mask dropped. So I planned my counterstrike. I called the bank first thing the next morning and asked to confirm an appointment for Mrs. Ellison's estate. The clerk on the other end politely told me Jason Ellison had a private meeting scheduled at 11 a.m. to finalize the transfer of my remaining assets. Perfect. I dressed deliberately, not like a victim, but like someone who still existed. Black blazer, hair pulled back, folder under my arm. Lila came with me, carrying a second copy of everything. We walked into the bank 15 minutes before Jason's appointment and asked for the manager. The manager, a tall man with a pinched expression, blinked at me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Can I help you?" "I'm Naomi Ellison," I said. "You're about to hand my life savings to my husband under the belief that I'm dead." "I'm not. Here's proof." I laid the folder on his desk. Death certificate, forged forms, *TS. His expression went from polite skepticism to outright alarm as he flipped through page after page. "Stay here," he said, rising. "I'll be right back." Minutes later, Jason walked in. He froze when he saw me sitting there. For the first time since this began, his mask cracked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Naomi," he said slowly, "what are you doing here?" "I live," I said simply. "You don't." The manager stepped between us. "Mr. Ellison, due to some serious discrepancies, today's transaction is suspended." Jason's jaw clenched. "She's unstable," he said quickly. "She's been like this for months. I was trying to help her." I cut him off. "Save it for the police." And right on cue, 2 uniformed officers walked in. Lila had called them from the parking lot before we went inside. She stepped forward, handing them her flash drive. "This shows him moving money from her accounts. He forged her signature. He filed a false death certificate." Jason tried to protest, but the evidence spoke louder than either of us. As the officers cuffed him, he turned his head and looked at me. The calmness was gone now. His eyes burned with something darker. "You think you've won," he hissed. "This isn't over." But for me, it was. As they let him out, the bank lobby fell silent. I stood there trembling, but upright, breathing. For the first time in weeks, my name belonged to me again. This was only the counterstrike, the moment the hunter realizes the prey has teeth. The aftermath, I knew, would be long and messy. But watching Jason disappear into the back of that patrol car, I felt a small, fierce spark of freedom. Tomorrow, I would start reclaiming my accounts, my job, my life. But today, I'd done the impossible. I had come back from the dead. The day after Jason's arrest, everything blurred into flashing lights, paperwork, and statements. The police kept me in an interview room for hours, asking the same questions over and over. "Did you know he had access to your legal documents?" "When was the last time you saw Dr. Harris?" Had there been any domestic issues prior to this incident? Their voices faded in and out, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew that if I hesitated, even for a moment, someone would start to doubt me again. The woman declared legally dead couldn't afford to sound hysterical. By evening, Detective Sanders, a calm, broad-shouldered man with eyes that missed nothing, entered the room holding a folder. "Mrs. Ellison," he said quietly, "we've confirmed that your husband submitted all documentation personally. The death certificate, the insurance forms, the power of attorney. He even used your old doctor's credentials to sign off electronically." I blinked. He forged Dr. Harris's signature? Sanders nodded. "More than that. Harris has been missing for 2 weeks. We found his car abandoned near the South Mesa Wellness Center." The air left my lungs. "You think Jason?" "We're not sure yet. But he had a financial motive and opportunity. He also had fake IDs tied to your name. Naomi, your husband planned to use your identity to disappear with the money. It wasn't just erasure. He wanted to be me." Sanders looked at me carefully. "We'll need you to testify once we build the case. For now, we'll move you to protective housing." It's standard. Protective housing. The words made me shiver. But I nodded. The weeks that followed felt unreal. I stayed at a safe apartment downtown under a temporary alias, Anna Ross. Every day brought new discoveries from the investigation. Jason had bribed a clerk at the county registrar to file the digital death certificate. He'd hacked into my employer's HR system using stolen credentials. He'd even taken out a short-term life insurance loan against my policy. Each new revelation made the truth heavier, but also clearer. His plan had been flawless, until the pharmacist said my name out loud. Lila visited often, bringing updates and warmth that kept me grounded. "You should see the news," she said one afternoon, setting a paper on the table. "Local man arrested for faking wife's death in elaborate fraud scheme." "Your headline material." I laughed weakly. I never wanted fame. She squeezed my hand. "You wanted truth. You got it." Still, I couldn't relax. Jason was in custody, but I knew him. He didn't like losing control. And he'd spent years perfecting lies that sounded sane. All it would take was one sympathetic ear, one doubt, and he'd twist the story again. Sure enough, when the preliminary hearing arrived, he tried exactly that. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Just polished wood, stale air, and a dozen reporters crowding the hallway. Jason entered in handcuffs, calm as ever, dressed in a crisp gray suit like he was attending a business meeting, not a felony hearing. He even smiled at me when our eyes met, as if this were a game we were still playing. The prosecutor laid out everything: falsified death certificate, forgery, identity theft, attempted fraud, possible obstruction of justice in Dr. Harris's disappearance. I sat quietly, hands clasped, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Then his lawyer stood. A woman with sharp eyes and a voice like silk. "My client, Mr. Ellison, acted under extreme emotional distress," she said smoothly. "He believed his wife was suffering from severe mental illness. He filed these documents on advice from her physician." "That's a lie." I burst out before I could stop myself. My voice echoed across the room. Jason's lawyer turned, feigning pity. "Mrs. Ellison, we understand this must be difficult, but surely even you can see how confused you sound." Confused. The same word he'd always used. It sent a flash of heat through me. I reached into my bag and handed a drive to the prosecutor, the backup copy of my recordings, the ones Jason hadn't known existed. Minutes later, the courtroom filled with his voice, projected through the speakers. "Of course she believes it. That's the point. If she doubts herself, she won't fight us. She'll always need us to tell her who she is." You could have heard a pin drop. The recording continued, his laughter, his calm planning, the moment he bragged to someone about the easiest payout in the world once she's officially gone. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge raised a hand for silence. Jason's composure fractured, just a flicker, but I saw it. The tight jaw, the narrowing eyes. When the prosecutor asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood. He told me I was crazy for years. When I stopped believing him, he made the world believe it instead. But I'm here. I'm alive. And he's the liar. My voice didn't shake. For once, I sounded like the person I always hoped I could be. Jason stared at me as the judge denied bail. The deputies led him away, his mask finally stripped away. He didn't shout, didn't plead. He just looked at me, as if trying to memorize the version of me he could no longer control. I didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, the sky was bright and impossibly clear. Reporters called my name, microphones reaching forward, flashes blinding me. But through the noise, one sound rose above everything, my mother's voice, calling out, "Naomi!" I turned, and she wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in months, I felt real. Solid. "You did it," she whispered. "You came back." I smiled through tears. No one gets to write my ending but me. That night, I returned to the safe apartment and watched the evening news replay my story. My story, not Jason's, not the one he forged. Me, alive. Me, telling the truth. It wasn't freedom yet. There would still be court dates, lawyers, headlines. But it was the beginning of something I thought I'd lost forever. Control. In the months after the trial, silence became something new to me. It wasn't the tense, suffocating silence Jason used to create. It was the quiet of peace, of a house that no longer held danger in its corners. He was sentenced to 20 years in state prison. The court found him guilty of identity theft, forgery, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. The investigation into Dr. Harris's disappearance eventually revealed that Harris had fled the state after Jason blackmailed him into signing the fake documents. They extradited him back to testify, and his statement sealed the case. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to prove I existed. The law, the world, they finally recognized what I'd been screaming into the void. I was real. I was alive. But freedom didn't feel like I'd imagined. It wasn't cinematic relief. It was quiet, uncertain, sometimes even hollow. When you spend so long fighting to be heard, you forget how to simply live once the noise stops. I moved out of Phoenix completely. Mom helped me pack what little remained. A few boxes, some clothes, the laptop that had saved me. I found a small house 2 hours north, tucked between red canyons and juniper trees. It had creaky floors and a leaky faucet, but when I stepped inside, it smelled like dust and possibility. For weeks, I lived off instant coffee and adrenaline, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced I heard his key in the lock. Then I'd remind myself, he was gone. He couldn't touch me anymore. Therapy helped. My therapist, Dr. Lynn, was soft-spoken but direct. She told me, when someone rewrites your life, reclaiming it is slow. You can't rush healing any more than you can rush trust. So I started small. I planted succulents on the windowsill. I got a new driver's license, Naomi Ellison, alive. I even went back to the pharmacy that had unknowingly started everything, thanked Claire, and handed her a small box of chocolates. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. I smiled. Don't worry, I said. I'm still here. The internet called me the woman who came back from the dead. There were podcasts, interviews, a documentary request from a true crime channel. I declined most of them. I didn't want to be someone's headline. I just wanted to breathe without being defined by what he did. Still, sometimes I caught myself scrolling through old photos, our wedding day, his smile, the life I thought I knew. It didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like looking through glass at a stranger. I asked Dr. Lynn once if it was normal to miss the person who hurt you. She nodded. You don't miss him, she said. You miss who you thought he was. You miss the safety that wasn't real. That hit harder than I expected. One afternoon, Lila drove up to visit. We sat on the porch drinking lemonade, watching the sunset paint the canyon gold. You know, she said, people at work still talk about you. The way you fought back. It's kind of legendary. I laughed softly. Legendary isn't the word I'd use. Surviving doesn't feel heroic. She shrugged. Maybe not. But you made everyone think twice about what we ignore. About how easily truth can disappear when no one asks questions. I looked out at the fading light and thought about that. How a single unchecked form, a single forged signature, had almost cost me everything. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a reminder of how fragile identity really was. Before she left, Lila hugged me tight. You rebuilt your life, she said. That's something. As the seasons shifted, the quiet began to feel less foreign. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic once a week, helping others untangle bureaucratic messes. Missing birth records, stolen IDs, name corrections. When people came and panicked, I understood the look in their eyes. I knew what it meant to question your own existence. Sometimes they recognized me from the articles. You're that woman, they'd say softly. The one who came back. I'd smile and correct them gently. The one who never really left. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table, writing a letter to my future self, something my therapist had suggested. The first lines came easily. You survived. You're real. You're enough. But what came next surprised me. Forgive him, eventually, not because he deserves it, but because you deserve peace. I paused, staring at the words. Forgiveness felt like a distant country, unreachable. But maybe it wasn't about excusing what he'd done. Maybe it was about refusing to carry his shadow forever. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. A year later, on the anniversary of the day the pharmacist told me I was dead, I hiked to the top of a canyon ridge near my house. The air was cold and bright. From up there, the world looked endless. I took a deep breath and whispered into the wind, I'm still here. The wind carried it away, soft and sure. I wasn't just Naomi Ellison, victim of fraud. I wasn't just the headline. I was a woman who had faced the impossible and come out the other side breathing. And that, finally, was enough.